Okay, welcome. Welcome to Recapped with Established. So each week we hold office hours for startups in the Startup of the Year network, and office hours are private, so the founders are comfortable sharing what's top of mind for them. But we get to talk at the end about what was on founders' minds and share the advice that we offer to them with you, the viewer. And if you'd like to meet our mentors, well, you can. Our annual summit is coming up in just 1 month. So join us November 16th, 17th, and 18th for pitches from 50 startups and talks and sessions and AMAs with founders such as Mike Evans from Grubhub, Kara Golden from Hintwater, Tim Draper, Lo Tony, and many more. And you can find all of that at summit.startupofyear.com. I'll put that in the chat. And thank you for being here today. We love working with founders and we love working with startups. And so it's a pleasure to have an old friend from the startup community here today and a colleague now at Established. Today, I welcome Shaw Lathrop.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to get to connect with some founders today.
Awesome, man.
Every day.
Every day. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And so Shaw and I first met through Scrib Boulder, which was a co-working space that very quickly became an accelerator called Boomtown Boulder. He was a co-founder at Boomtown Boulder, did 10 cohorts in the Boulder location, and then went out to Atlanta to build out the farm in Atlanta, which was a partnership between Comcast and the Boomtown team, and built out that accelerator and did 2 cohorts in Atlanta, and then joined us here at Established just last year. So what did I miss, Shaw? There you go. I know I should be wearing my swag.
I think that kind of hits some of the high level. I'm very excited to be on the Established team. And Rich and I have the pleasure of getting to work together 5 days a week. And most of the work that we're doing is actually working with AFWorks, which is the innovation arm of the Air Force. And it's this great match where we get to connect startups from really all across the country and work to get them on government contracts and provide opportunities for non-dilutive funding and that nice customer in the DoD. So it's great work that we get to do. And I think kind of an extension of a lot of the community development work that both of us have been involved in for, I feel like I've known you 7 or 8 years now, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. It was 9 years ago that I moved to Boulder, and it's been probably 8 years that I've been involved in the startup community. Probably more than that, probably 8.5. But yeah, good stuff. A lot of good stuff happening.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's great to be able to work on a national scale with Startup of the Year and Established, and with AFWorks as well. A lot of fun stuff happening there. So let's talk about what we talked to founders about this week, or in general in the past as well. One interesting thing that, considering our roots, Shaw, of connecting and in the Boulder community, of getting out into the community and what that's like and how community is essential to startups. I was talking to a startup from New York City, and this is their first startup, and they have corporate jobs and careers in paths in other ways. And they were asking about, well, how do I go and, get this advice? And we don't know anything about being a startup. And how do we go and meet other people and the founders and the investors and all those people that we should be talking to. And the normal thing is, right, well, okay, look, here's this meetup and here's that meetup. And then make sure you go to New York Tech Day and make sure you do this and go to there. And you have to go to these things and attend these events and talk to these people in order to gain this tribal knowledge. And a lot of it's online, but it's also hard to parse that stuff that's online. And it's just the way we're built is just this sort of, that human interaction. But I was at a loss because what's going on right now? How do you get out into the community if the community is all this, right?
Well, and you're a huge networker. You're one of the few people I know that actually loves going to networking events.
Guilty.
I admire you in that. I'd say I begrudgingly attend them, and then once I'm there, I'm like, okay, I'm having a pretty good time.
And I come home and it's like 8 or 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, oh my god, that was amazing! I just can't wait to do that again. And my wife's like, oh,
see, and after like a startup week for me, I like shut off my phone and lock myself in my house for the next week just to recharge all my batteries. But it is one of those things where I love it, and I love especially like getting to connect with my favorite people in the community and seeing them.
Yeah.
And it's hard right now. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to not have that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's hard for people coming in, whether this is your first startup or your 10th startup, so much of your ability to succeed really relies on the network that you have. And yeah, I think that's an interesting question that's coming up. Like, how do I tap into communities, especially if it's something where I'm not already plugged in?
Yeah, totally. And I said, the best that I could say was like, you need to think about it like it's not COVID, and go find the meetups and the networking groups and the networking groups. It's funny. Networking groups has this like negative connotation to it, at least even for me as somebody who likes to network. But meetup has this great connotation to it, right? So find the meetups, find the events, find the programming that would normally be happening, and see what they're doing to do it on a virtual basis. We've seen a huge uptick in office hours, right? I mean, Startup of the Year rolled out an office hours program. I've seen that Backstage Capital has office hours programs. I've seen the Female Founders Alliance has an office hours that they have open. I just saw Jackie from our team just shared that Techstars accelerators are doing office hours. Now it's more focused on, meeting the potential, somebody, a potential accelerator that you would go to. But that's also a great meeting is from the old adage, ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money. So get out and ask for advice. So just finding what those resources are and how you can make those connections in your community. The downside is that you can't do that in person, but the upside is you can now do it nationally, and it's a hell of a lot easier to do it nationally than it ever was before.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's true. Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people do tend to kind of look within their communities, which is great because I think every community has leaders and people with insights. But with this virtual world, it's been interesting to see how the community is all online now, and it's not as rigidly defined by borders.
Yeah, totally. Which is great, and it gives access to something that we've always been passionate about for Startup of the Year, which is giving startups a national stage to stand on, and something at in Boulder Boulder is great now, or Boulder has in Denver have this great reputation globally, but that wasn't always the case. What's funny, well, going back 20 years ago, it was the case that Denver was a big tech hub and Boulder was a big tech hub again 20 years ago. And then when the startup wave started happening, it was maybe they already had some of that basis in place. But anyway, I digress.
Well, what's interesting for me is I moved to Boulder, I guess 11 years ago, and and I moved here as a hippie.
Yeah.
There's that very big community, and I moved here to do yoga and study Ayurvedic medicine, and get involved with the Buddhist community. And I didn't even know that there was a startup scene here. And then it was one of those things when I went to school, I graduated and went in the health profession and was an entrepreneur. And that's kind of how
Yeah.
I got plugged into it.
Yeah.
Was I said, okay, I have all this knowledge of how to do these things, but my business sense is not there, and I don't have a community to market or network to. And that's kind of how I first got plugged in. And then as soon as I did, I was like, it's like you've been, um, living across the street from Disney World, and you didn't even like think to you're just wandered in there. And for me, like I was so blown away um, by how welcoming the community was,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and just by how many things that were going on, that it ended up sweeping me into it so much that I ended up putting my health practice on hold for a little bit. And then as we transitioned, so I was the director of Scrib Co-working. And as I got more pulled into the co-working movement, I fell in love with this concept,
Yeah.
because I had
Yeah.
seen as an entrepreneur how isolating it can be,
Oh yeah.
and how there's a million different things you have to know. And I I needed to connect with people to help me understand how to do those things. And so the more I got pulled into it, the more I kind of my health practice got pushed to the background. And then when we transitioned to launching Boomtown, I moved it into the hobby category of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you hit on a couple of interesting things there, right? First, I love that that you came out to be a hippie. But let's talk about, that ties into something else that came up this week. And that was the closeness of startup communities and how bad actors are hopefully pushed out, right? Or shaped to, hey, you're being a jerk. Don't behave like that. Is what is, there's always exceptions. But for the most part, I feel like the startup community is not only welcoming, but also very caring, and is very much about a community. And what happens there is that when people are misbehaving, the community comes forward to either surround them and re-educate them in a very good way, or to let them know, like, yeah, you know what, you don't want to talk to this. You don't want to deal with this person. They're bad news, and that word also travels around.
It does. And I think, I think people are welcoming at first, and it's, but to a point. And that's where I think that you don't want to come into a community saying, what's in it for me?
Right. Right.
And I think that's a lot of this misconception around what networking is. It's like, I'm going to go and these people are going to plug me in and connect me, instead of coming in and actually wanting to support the community, and to say, if there's things that I want to learn, and there's people that I want to get connected with, like, what do I have to share? And am I willing to do that work myself? And that's where I think you've seen, and I've certainly seen, like, people who come in here and really are all about, like, aggressive and, like, oh, introduce me to this person, and showing up when it serves them, and when it doesn't, they don't. You go to their events, and then they don't come to yours. Or
Mm-hmm.
and then by the opposite hand, there's those people who come in, and they really care, and they're excited to show up, and they're excited to donate their time and their expertise. And I think that people see that.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think it becomes willing to say, okay, this person, like, they're part of my community. Like, I feel like I want to welcome them in. And as a result, I want to see them succeed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then people are willing to make those introductions and to give their time. But if it feels like, people are coming in and they're tourists, and they're looking to take, get their snapshots, get their experience, and take it and run with it, then I think people see that behavior too.
And
And
you probably saw a lot the gamut of bringing in. So you bring in 10 cohorts to Boulder. As probably, let's just call it 100, startups, right? And they're coming from all over. It's not just Boulder; they're coming from all over the country, all over the world. How do you prepare the founders as they come into the startup community particularly in Boulder, but in general, right? What's the advice that you give them about getting out and meeting people and connecting with people and and becoming a good player in the community?
Um, I think it's about I, I don't know. So we typically would start really by doing some kind of orientation on the Boulder community itself, and I think every community is unique. You know, Boulder versus in New York versus LA versus in Atlanta, they each have their own style, and I think part of it is coming in and understanding what is the protocols. Like, is it
Mm-hmm.
appropriate to just reach out and ask somebody if they'll have coffee with you, or is that like, do you need to go through some kind of preordained steps of introductions? And I think the biggest thing is treat people with respect. And if
Yep.
you're asking
Yep.
somebody for something, don't don't waste their time, and don't come in expecting all kinds of things. Like, I
Oh
think
yeah.
of it a lot as like dating. Like, don't come on too strong, because you scare people off. Like, take the time. Like, building community takes time, and I think that's the thing, is come, show up, and over time, when you're ready, reach out and build those relationships.
And then let's talk about, when you get down to the meeting and, you're going to have lots of meetings with people and you don't know if they're going to be the right fit for you, whether you're looking for a mentor, an investor, an advisor, an employee, a partner, a customer, right? But as you prepare for the meeting, what's your advice to founders as they're preparing for those, to meet those folks that they are getting connected to in the community?
I think having a real clear agenda of what you're trying to accomplish is important. Like, with some of these office hours or with a mentor meeting, I'm sure you've seen a full spectrum of people. Some people who come up and they're like, "Hey, man, what's up?"
Right, totally. Yeah,
And
yeah.
kind of
You see him
just show
scrambling
up
around. He's like,
thinking,
yeah, you are meeting with, yeah, my name's Rich. I'm right here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, if you're having a mentor meeting with somebody, come prepared with what you want to talk about,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and have an agenda. And we talked about a little bit about this idea of like, plan, 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 and then screw the plan,
Yeah.
because
I love it.
you have places that you might want to go, but again, it's like a conversation has to flow
Mm-hmm.
organically,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to
Yep.
be like, what's interesting about this conversation for me and what's interesting for you.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if I sit
Yep.
there and spend the whole time talking just about myself and about my business and how great it is and why you shouldn't, like, you're just going to sit there nodding and just be like,
Yeah.
thinking in your head, like, gotta get out of here.
Yep.
um,
Yep.
so, come prepared with what you want to talk about. And at the same time, be prepared to listen and to find that place where it's symbiotic in some ways.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you experience any of that in particular with office hours as of late?
Yeah. I've definitely had startups that had no idea, about me or my background, and that's fine. We try to provide at least a LinkedIn link to learn about somebody. And definitely, no clear ask. And so, look, I do office hours every week. I love meeting with founders. I've been doing this for years. And so if you're not going to drive it, I'm going to drive it. And that's, it will reflect poorly on you, but that's okay. Like, okay, tell me about this, tell me about that, tell me about this, tell me about that. And just keep digging and digging and digging until I find something that's like, okay, let's talk about that and dig in on that. But oftentimes, yeah, you start the conversation in one direction and you find something, a commonality, and you just kind of riff on that for a little bit, and you're not necessarily talking about what the agenda was, but you're building that rapport and creating that connection, and it works both ways, right? For both sides of the table, people want to have connections with people, and so it's good to have that free flowing aspect, but it's also like good to have that agenda, know who you're talking to. I read about the startups and look at their websites and read their pitch decks before I meet with them and make sure I understand what their business is, and so that I can ask good questions about what they're doing. And sometimes I can say, we can skip all this stuff because I understand it. Let me replay it for you. Does that jive? Okay, cool. Let's talk about, let's go down a level. But yeah, I love that plan, and then screw the plan.
Well, I think every meeting is different, and mentor meetings and investor meetings are different, and yet they can be the same thing sometimes.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I can't tell you how many times I've seen that somebody comes in as a mentor, and being asked for their advice and helping to shape the company really builds an interest and a commitment that they have in the company. And as they get in and see under the hood, like over time, those people come in and they're like, wow, this is a great company. I'm interested in investing. But I think, and I think that that's where a lot of times it's great to approach investors more like a mentor. I was watching
yes.
Office Hours recap you did a little bit ago, or you just said in this episode, ask for advice and get money, ask for money and get advice.
Yep.
Did you say that in this episode?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. I say it so much, so I've probably said it 3 times this week already. So,
with COVID, everything is Groundhog Day.
Yeah, tell me about it.
My brain is like.
We took the kid. Yeah, I left the house yesterday, and I think it was the first time in 17 days, other than walking around the neighborhood, that I left the house. Talking about community, right? Is it don't get out into the community? Oh, strange times, my friend. Strange times.
Plus, we just, as startup people, we have those phrases and buzzwords that we just repeat on cycle. It's really always take the meeting. Give first. Well, I think this comes back to relationships again, into playing the long game. Don't only approach somebody when you want to ask him for money.
Yeah.
And I think that this is something a lot of startups do, and I think I've seen myself do this too. Is where you say, okay, it's not ready yet. It's not ready yet. Like I'm going to hold on to it until I have all my metrics and my traction that I can show.
Yep.
And once you get to that point, that's great. But like if you wait until you get to that point, like you might have already put all this effort in and made tons of mistakes.
Yep.
And that's where it's good to be willing to get out there when you're not totally ready, and to be a little embarrassed about what you have, but
Yep.
still be willing to put it out there.
Yep.
And then that gives a chance for people to see you grow over time.
Yes.
And I think that that's a big thing that investors want to see,
Yes.
is that you're in this for the long run.
Yes.
This relationship isn't just about like, I'm gonna get next next year.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
you're building and growing and changing year after year, and that you're willing to be humble.
Yeah.
And ask for advice. I think coachability is something that's vastly misunderstood and underappreciated as a skill set.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ability to really be able to take feedback and to not take it personally, and to not be shy or embarrassed to say, we're not there yet. but here's where we want to go.
Yeah. I think that coachability is another one of those misunderstood things, but misunderstood, I think, from the investor side of things, of like, well, we're looking for founders that are coachable. No, what you need is a founder that knows this business better than you do, that can drive it and grow it, and that can push through, sometimes bullheaded. And look, the bullheaded, goes both ways. I don't mean being a jerk. That's different. That's different than being driven. But I think what you said about coachability is what the essence of it is being open to hearing other opinions and perspectives and to taking them into account, right? That doesn't mean that you and I, or that I have a conversation with the founder CEO and then they go out and change and pivot and flip-flop directions, right? And I think that's how a lot of investors think about coachability, is like, well, if things are going bad, I need them to be able to listen to what I'm saying and change direction. That's not always the right case. And I think it's more about, are you willing to listen to people? Are you willing to take in what they're saying and evaluate it and weigh it against the convictions that you have for your business and the direction that your business is going? Fine line there. Does that make sense?
It does. I will say that in my own personal experience, and this is just anecdotal, I think I've seen that the people that are bullheaded and feel like they're leaning too much on conviction and not enough on listening to advice, I think at most, like 90% of them I see fail. And I think it's the people that I've seen that are willing to say what they don't know. And to understand that, they might only have part of the vision.
Right.
And that's a scary thing. Like, as a CEO, you want to project that you're infallible and that this inside and out. But the ones that are willing to take that advice and move are also the ones that are going to look at the data that doesn't point where they want and be willing to say, okay, we need to try something else, instead of just, no, I know this is going to work, and I stake everything on it. So
well said. Yeah.
And with Boomtown, this was such a big thing that we noticed more and more over time, was that coachability was one of the biggest factors we looked for.
Well, that makes sense for an accelerator. It definitely makes sense for an accelerator. Yes, because you're there to learn. You are an institution of learning, whether the state wants to call you that or not, right? That's what, an accelerator is there to accelerate the growth, but that only happens through coaching.
Definitely. Well, and so everybody that participated in office hours this week, and if you haven't, I strongly encourage it. It's a great opportunity, and I know that we have some great members of our team, and looking ahead at the summit schedule, I'm absolutely floored and excited, and I hope I get a chance to talk to some of these people.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes you forget to do that. I would imagine, as an investor and a mentor. Well, you seem like you're very coachable, actually. I bet you have your own series of mentors and people that you go to.
I definitely do. I have my own little cache. I have a therapist and a coach. It helps to have both.
I have a lot of friends that are therapists, and so I just
come on over for dinner.
Yeah, some of my best friends are, Techstars mentors and business coaches, and so I'm like, yeah, just hang out with you.
Yeah, let's go for a walk. Let's go for a hike. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Let's have lunch. Yeah.
That's good. Well, Shaw, this has been great, and it's wonderful to share this time with you. It's wonderful to share the weeks with you as we work together and continue to drive. What I see is driving the economy forward, really, through the startups and the engagement that we're able to provide. So,
definitely.
Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me be a part of this team. And I love the mission we're doing, especially taking this work to some of the underserved communities, because I think it's really easy to live in the bubble, the Front Range bubble, and to think that startups everywhere have access to the same resources. And that's where I'm excited to build that global network.
Yes.
And to share these insights.
Yep. Absolutely. Good stuff. Well, folks, thank you for tuning in, and definitely check out the Startup of the Year Summit November 16th, 17th, and 18th. We'll have startups pitching. We'll have founder talks. We'll have mentor talks. And for Startup of the Year applicants, we're doing office hours this month. We're going to take a pause on office hours in November. We'll still do the live stream, but we'll recap from some of the mentors we had from the summit. And then office hours will pick back up for Startup of the Year and in December. And applications are for Startup of the Year are closed right now, but we will reopen those shortly so that we can still get to meet great companies and bring them into the network. So again, check out summit.startupofyear. Be sure to apply or register and join us there. And thank you everybody for joining us today. And thank you again, Shaw.